Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Ashish and welcome to this Tag Instance channel. So today in this lecture we are going to see how to write a custom finder method by using a JP repository. And we know that a JP repository is used to connect with the database, right? So it has some like predefined method to do the CRUD operations, like to save any resource in a database and to update any resource or to get all the data from the database, right? So using a JP repository, we can also write a custom method for doing the operations with the database as per our the requirement. So this method are also known as a custom finder method or a derived query method, right? So let's start the session and let's see how we can write the custom finder method or like a derived query method. So before starting the session, I will suggest you to watch the playlist of my like the Spring Boot tutorial, and here you can find a bunch of the lectures regarding the Spring Boot. And recently I have uploaded the lecture on how to create a dynamic chart with the database and with the thine leaf and the JP repository. And also I have like discussed how to handle the exception with the Spring Boot in a like a Spring MVC project. And also I have like discussed how to do the unit testing using the Mockito framework by mocking the data so that it will not hit the database, right? It will like mock the false data and then it will do the testing and all. And also I have like created a lecture on the profile, how to use the profile in your Spring Boot application, and how to create the documentation of your like Spring Boot project. And there I have used like a JSON doc and a Swagger for creating the documentation. And also I have shown the actuator and how to use the actuator and all, right? And how to do the Spring security and all. And there I have seen the authentication and the authorization and all, and how to enable the Spring security and all. So here you can find the bunch of the Spring Boot like the project or the tutorial regarding the Spring Boot, right? So let's go to our like the today like the like the session to how to write a custom the custom like the finder method by using a JP repository. So for that here I'm going to create like a Spring Boot application, and then I'm going to do the CRUD operation. And there I'm going to create one like the user resource, and the user resource will contain like ID, name, and the city and all, right? And then I'm going to show how to save that user resource in a database, and then I will show how to fetch the data. So to fetch the data, we have the certain like the predefined methods available in a JP repository, like find all method and find by ID method, and like that methods we can use to fetch the data from the database. And also I will show you how to write the custom finder method. Let's say that I need to find the value from the user according to the name or according to the city or according to certain like the condition according to your requirement. Then we can also write a custom method in the JPA, and the JPA will do the operations behind, and it will fetch the data according to our requirement. So let's start the session. So for that I'm going to create one Spring Boot application or the project using the Spring Initializer, right? So here is my like in Spring Slicer. So let's change the group name. So let's change the artifact name or the project name. So let's provide the project name as something custom finder method. All right. Now I will add the like the dependencies. So here I will add Spring Wave. I will add Spring like Dev tool, so that my application get like automatically like start if I do any some changes, right? Then I will add a JP repository for doing the operations with the database, and then I will use a MySQL driver for a MySQL database, right? So these are the dependencies I am adding. So let's generate this project. So it is going to download in a G format. So we need to extract it. So let's go to the downloaded folder path, extract it here, and now it's time to import this project into my Eclipse, right? So for that, what we can do, simply we need to go to the file, open project from the file system, select the directory, and then go to the path where you have saved your project, right? So custom finder method is my like the project name. So select it and then finish this. So by this way, we have successfully imported this project inside my Eclipse, right? So now here I am going to create all the packages first, right? So here I'm going to create the packages like model, controller, service, and the repository. And then I'm going to create one like user resource. And then I'm going to do the CRUD operations. And then I will show how to write your custom method or a custom finder method to search any query from the database, to fetch any like the query from the database. So for that, let me first add all the packages. So let's first add a model package, and inside the model package, I'm going to add my model class. Let's again add one more package, that is service package, to add my service layer. Let's add another package, that is controller, and inside this package, I'm going to add my controller class. Let's create one more package, and this package I will name as a repository. So inside the repository package, I am going to add my repository interface. All right. So let's start with the like the model class. So go to the model package, and then here you need to create one model class with the name something user, right? So here I'm going to save the user information. All right. So user contains like some attributes, like let's say of ID of integer type, another attribute of string type, let's say name, another attribute I want to add as a user password, then the other attribute I will add as something like the city, right? So these are the four attributes I am using. So I have to mark this class as a entity annotation, so that the JP repository or the Hibernate is going to create automatically the table inside my database with the name user, right? And the column name will be go with the ID name and the password and the city. And if you want to change this, then you have to annotate with the red column annotation. And if you want to go with your own name for the table, then you have to annotate with the red table. But for now I want the same name as I'm defining my model class, right? So let's mark this with the ID annotation for making this ID as the primary key. All right. So let's create all the getters and the setter method for this. So go to the resource and then generate getters and setters, select all, and then generate. So in this way, we have created the getter and the setter, and we have completed our model class. And the user model contained ID, name, password, and the city attribute, right? So these are the four attributes. Now let's go to the repository folder and let's create one like the repository interface. So I will provide the name as the user repository. All right. So this is the interface. So I need to extend this with a JPA repository, because here I am using a JPA repository for dealing with the database, right? So in the generic part, as we have to use our like the model class name. So model class is user, right? And with the ID generic, we need to provide the data type of our like the primary key. So primary key is like ID, and if you have remember, the ID is of integer type, so you have to provide here the integer. All right. So this is my like the yeah. So this is my like the user repository interface, and which I have extended with the JP repository. And the JP repository contains all the method, the CRUD operations, which you will see in sometimes. All right, so now it's time to add a service layer. So go to the service package. Let's add a service class quickly. So let's name it as a user service. Yeah, fine. So let's mark this class with the at the rate service annotation to make this class as a service layer. And now I'm going to inject my user repository inside my user service. So for that, I need to write user repository and then reference variable as a user repository. And I have to do the auto wiring. So mark this with the annotation auto add. All right, so the Spring container is going to inject this user repository inside my user service, and here I need to create some method. So let's say that first of all I'm going to create a method to add a resource to the database, to save any resource to the database, and then I will add one method to get or to fetch all the resources available inside my database, and then I will create one method to get any resource according to the ID. So let's add this method one by one. So first of all, I'm going to add a method to save user, right? So let's give the name as a save user. So here we need to pass our like the entity, like the model class. All right. So import this. So this is the reference. All right. Now I need to call the user repository. So you can call the user repository, and here in the user repository we have the certain like the method and the predefined methods. Like to save, we have the save method, right? So inside the save method we can pass our entity class of user. So it is going to save this user resource to my like the database by using the JPA repository, right? So only this we have to use a save method to do the saving. All right, so now let's create another method to fetch all the values available inside my database. So let's say that if I'm fetching the value, then of course this will come in a list. So that's why I'm doing list, and here in a generic I'm using the user. All right, let's provide the name as get all users. All right, and here we can use the user repository reference, and then we can call the JPA. Like the JPA, like the JPA repository provides some methods. Like we have a find all method, right? So with the find all method, we can fetch all the resources available in my like a database. And here we have to return, because here we are using the return. So let me add a return statement here, return. All right, so this is going to return all the resources available in my table, like the user, in a form of list. Now let's add another. Yeah, now let's add another method with the name public, and this one is like I'm going to use the list for this also. All right, so I want to fetch get user by ID. So I have provided the name as the same. So get user by provide ID. So it means that it is going to take one like the argument so of integer type ID, right? So we can simply use the user repository reference, and here we have one method find by ID, right? So find by ID, and here you can see that, the return type is of optional, right? So optional is coming from my Java 8, and the optional class is used to handle the null pointer exception. All right, yeah. So this will take the ID. All right. So we have to return. So let's add a return statement here. So here I need to change this method to the return type as the optional user. No problem. Let's change it. Let's save it. Let's save, yeah. So here inside my service class or a service layer, I have added the three method. First to save any user to the database, then second method to get all the users, and the third method to get user by ID. So these are the predefined methods, right? To fetch the data, I have used get all user, means the find all method, And to find any resource according to the ID, I have used the find by ID method. So these are the predefined method available in my JPA repository, right? So now let's add the controller class. So let's go to the controller package quickly and let's create one class with the name something user controller. And inside the user controller class, I am going to create the endpoint. So let me first mark this with the REST controller to make this as a REST controller. And I want a class label request mapping. So let me add a request mapping. So I will provide the path as a stake instance. All right. So this is my root request mapping path. And now inside the controller, I need to create the three endpoint. The first endpoint to save any like the user restores to the database, and the second endpoint to get all the resources available in the database, and the third endpoint to find or to fetch the user according to its ID. All right. So like before creating the endpoint, I'm going to inject my user service inside my user controller. So how we can do, we have to write private and then user service. All right, then I have to do user service reference, and then I have to mark this with the auto-wire annotation. So the Spring container is going to inject this user service inside my user controller, and then we can use the user service reference variable to call the service class method, right? So now it's time to create the endpoint. So first endpoint I'm going to use to save any user resource to the database. So public and return type I will keep as a string. So let's add user as the method name. And here and here I need to take this like the parameter of the entity user class from the request body. So for that we can use add the red request body annotation. All right, and then here you can assign the user and the reference variable as user. All right, and now I need to let's return something as, let's say, saved user successfully. All right, or saved user. All right. Now so before the return statement I need to call the method of my service class. So for that we can use the user service reference, and then we have the method like I believe the save user. Yeah, so inside the save user we need to pass the argument as user, and which we're taking from the request body. All right, so this is my like the entity class. Sorry, so this is my yeah, so this is my the endpoint, and this endpoint is used to add any resource to the database or to save a resource to the database. So I want to call this method from http post. So for that I will use post mapping, and here inside the post mapping we can map like we can provide the URL path also. So I am adding add user, right? So with the add user and the post method, it is going to call this endpoint, and then it is going to save this user to the database. All right, so now let's create another endpoint to get all the data from the database. So for that I will use the list type, and in the generic I will use the user. All right, now let's provide the name as name of the endpoint as get all users. All right, so user service dot we have the method get all user, right? So simply we are going to call this, and then here we are going to return this. Yeah, so this is the endpoint to fetch all the users from the database, and I want this method to be called with the get mapping. And here I will use get all users, yeah, as the endpoint. Sorry, as the request mapping, right? So now let's add the another endpoint to fetch any user according to certain ID. So this will be also list type. This is the user. All right. Get user by id is my method name or my endpoint name, and here I need to take from the from the path of the url. Means I need to take the id from the path of the url. Then here we can use at the rate path variable, and then we can assign the integer type of id. Yeah. So here I need to call the user service dot, we have the method get user by id method, and inside this I'm going to pass this id, and then it is going to return. So here, if you remember, inside the user we are using the optional as the return type. So that's why I will change this to the optional user so that it will handle the null pointer exception. All right. So I will call this method with the get mapping, and I will provide the request mapping as get user by ID, and with the ID I will pass as this ID, right? So this ID will be stored in the parameter of this method by the at the rate path variable. Annotation is going to take this ID from the URL path, and this id value will be stored here, and then it is going to call the get user by id method of my service layer. All right. So this is all about my service layer, like the controller. So here inside my controller I created the three endpoints, right? So now let's go to, yeah, so now let's go to our mm, yeah, so let's go to our application.properties file, and here I am using the MySQL database. So for that I need to provide the configuration for my MySQL database. So here I need to provide like the driver name as a com.mysql jdbc driver, and this is my URL, and this is my the schema name or the database name, right? So let me copy this. Yeah, and this is my username root, and the password is this, and the so SQL is true, and the DDL auto I have done as update, and this is a dialect I am using, right? So this is the configuration you have to add if you're using the MySQL database. So let me save this. Now I need to create this schema inside my like the database, right? So let's go to the MySQL workbench, and here you can create the database or the schema with the name I have mentioned in the application properties file with the custom finder method. Apply this, so it is going to create that schema here. All right, close this. Now everything is done. Now I am going to start this means run this application. So go to the main class, right click and run as a Java application. So here it is going to start my application. Yeah, and then we are going to do some like the CRUD operations, and then we are going to check that whether our like the CRUD operations we have like created in my like the controller class, that it is working or not. So our application has started on 8080, right? So this is our controller class, and this is my stag instance is my request mapping. So let's go to the postman, and here this is the path stag instance. All right. So I need to add some resource, right? So this is my endpoint to add the user resource. So this is the request mapping. So go to the postman and paste it here, and you have to do the post method. And here I'm passing the id as one's not one, name as Manish, and the password as Manish at the rate 123, and the city is like silly, right? So let me hit the send button, and let's see that whether I have able to save or not. Yes, we are getting the 200 okay status, and saved user is a return type. It means that we are able to save the data to the database. Now let me add one more data, and then I will show you to the MySQL workbench 202. All right. So let's provide the name as Ashish, and the password as Ashish at the rate 123, and this is like Ranchi city. All right. This is the post. Let me hit again. So you can see that we have saved. Now I want to fetch all the data, right? So it means that, so for that we can use the get method, and we have the endpoint, I believe, get all users was the endpoint URL, right? So this is the get. Now we can hit this. So you can see that we fetch the two data we have said just means we have saved just now, right? So we can so we have created one more endpoint to take the data to get user according to the ID. So get so I believe the endpoint name was get user by ID, and I need to pass the ID. So let me fetch the 202 ID. So 202, and this is the get method. So let me hit this. So it is going to call the endpoint. Yeah. So our all endpoints are working fine as we have created now, right? Yeah. So if you will see here, I have created the means I have used the two, like to fetch the values. I have used the two method here. So this is the JPA repository, and this is my service class, and you will see that I'm using the find all method and the find by ID. And now let's say that I want to find means I want to fetch the data according to the, let's say that according to the name, or according to the password, or according to the city. Then how we can do this, right? So this we are going to see how we can write a custom user defined method for this, right? So let's say that I want to fetch any data according to the city. So how we will use that, right? So for that, let's say that I want to fetch some data according to city. So how you will write a SQL query for that? So you will simply write select, right? And here, like what we will do, select star from the table name. So let's say that my table name is like user. All right. So select star from table, and then I will do where, like city equals to, let's say, like anything, right? So this is the city name. All right. So this is the SQL query I will use if I will so yeah, so this is the SQL query I will use to fetch the user table data according to some city name, right? So how we can use this query by writing just the name of the method, right? So here we are going to use just, we are going to define the method here, and then we will see how this query will be executed internally by the Spring Boot. So only we need to define one method here. So how we will do this? So for this we have the method. So for that we have to use find, and find by is the, like the constant name we have to use. And then after that we can use the any attribute name. So let's say that I want to find my user according to the ID, according to the city. So for that here I need to write find by city. All right. So this method is going to find the user, right? So find the user according to the city. Yeah. So this is the method. So here we will do like public, and the return type will be of list type, and this is the user. All right. So I hope you understand this. So this is the whole, like the method we have to declare inside my interface. So as this is the interface, so it means that we can only declare the method inside the interface. We cannot implement it, right? So this is yeah, so here we are getting the list as the return type. It means that it is taking as a star from the table. So this is the user, and where the, and like the where city. So here we are doing find by city, right? So find by city is the name, and here we have to return as the city, right? So according to this it is going to find. So city is of like a string type. So this is the, yeah, so this is the method we have to write if we want to find any user information according to the city. So let me like delete this query. Yeah. So how we will use this method? So here we have defined our own user defined method, or the custom finder method according to our requirement. So requirement was that I need to find the user according to the city name, right? So we have to just add find by, and then we can use any attribute we want to find, as we have mentioned inside my user. So we can write like password, or we can use name. So by the way, we are using the city for here, so that's why I have written city in the like the camel case like format. So save this, and now I need to create one like the service class. So inside the service class I need to create one method. So let's go and add public list. All right, so this is the user. Get user by city name. So this is my method name, and here I need to provide the string city. All right, all right. So now I need to call the user repository reference, and here if you will see, then get sorry, find. Yeah. So if we will see that, then we can see that we got one method that find by city, right? So now we got one method find by city as we have defined in our user repository. So this is the find by city is like not like not the like the predefined method, but it is the custom method we have defined in my repository, right? So this we are using, and here we are passing the city. So it is going to call this method, and then it is going to fetch the user according to this city name. And now I need to call this method from our, well, all right, so this is our service class. Now I need to call one endpoint inside my controller also. Let's go create one endpoint, public. So list will be the return type, and here the user. So let's provide the name at get user by city name is my endpoint name. And here I will take this from the path variable. So I will use the path variable. So city is of like a string type. Sorry, here I've done the spelling mistake. Sorry, that's fine here. So make it is small, yeah. So now I need to call the user service like the service class method. So user service dot, we have the method like get user by city name. All right, so select it, and then here we are passing the city, so it is going to call a service class method, and then we need to return it. All right, yeah, so we have done all the implementation, and we have written our own custom method, and then we are calling this method from our service class, and also we have created our own endpoint, and now we are going to access the endpoint. So before that, let me call this method with the get mapping, and let me mark one URL for this. uh, Get user by city name. All right, so this is my username, and here I am passing the city name inside my URL like this. All right, so save this. So as we are using the dev tool, so our application will automatically start. So let's go to our postman, and here we need to pass, now we need to find get user by city name, right? And then we need to pass a city name. So we have the Ranchi, and we have one like city with the name Silli. So let me fetch the information of the user according to the Silli city. So I have added here Silli. All right, so this is the get method. So let me send. So after hitting the send method, you can see that I fetch the data of the user as 101 according to the city Silli, right? So in this way, we have added the user defined method. So in the same way, you can add any like method by find by, if you want to find the user information according to the password, then you just need to add here the method, one more method with the name, let's say, copy this, paste this, and here you need to pass find by password. All right, So, and then here you need to pass the password, and then in the same way you need to implement this method in the service layer, and then you have to create the endpoint also, and then you can access this like the endpoint, and you can fetch the user information according to the password or according to the any attribute name here you have defined. So this is regarding a custom like finder method. So here if you will see, then I will show you in the Spring Boot document part, means the more like the data, like the keys data. So here you have to go to the like the Google, and then you have to search Spring Data supported keywords, right? And then you have to enter. So here you will see that you will find one the first link as a Spring Data JPA reference document. And like if you'll open this, so this is the reference document of a Spring Boot. And if you will go downside, if you go scroll down, yeah, then here you can see the keywords, like, so this is the keyword here, like the supported keywords with the method name. So yeah, so here like you can use any like the keyword, like the distinct keyword. So let's say that you have the n number of data which are like the copied data, and you want the data as a like a distinct data, right, as a unique data. Then you can use this method, right, find distinct by, and you have to use the attributes. So let's say that you have the attribute with the name last name and the first name inside your user like the model. Then you can use this method name inside your repository, and by this internally it will call a select distinct where x name and the first name is this. So internally it is going to activate, or it is going to invoke this like query. And let's say that you want to use the n keyword, like find by last name and the first name. So yeah, so let's say that in my case, in our case, we have the user model, in that we have the like the city name and the name, right? So here you can use find by city name and a name. Then it is going to use the and operator. It means that both names should be there inside my database, then only it is going to fetch the data. And after that, inside internally it is going to use this query, right? So in the same way, if you want to use the or inside, then you can use find by name or and then first name. So this is the first attribute name and the second attribute, right? So in this way you can use the between, less than, and the greater than, and after, before, and all, right? Like not lying, ending with, containing. And let's say that you want to do the order by, it means that you want to sort. So you can use find by age, order by last name in a descending order. So you have to use descending. So this is going to sort in a descending order according to your last name and the age, right? So if you want to not nil and not in, true, false, and all, right? So these are the keyword. So let me show you one example. Let's say that you want to use the and operator. Let's say that you want to fetch with the and operator, or let's say that you want to fetch with the or operator, right? So you have to copy this name, copy this method, go to your project. Inside the repository you need to add this method. All right, so this will return a list. So user, all right. So find by last name. So in our case, if you'll see here, we have the attribute like city and the name. So let's say that I want to use the name and the city, all right, to find the data. So in our case, we have the name. So let me add here name, and in the first name I will use my city, right? So here I'm using the or keyword, right? So or keyword is going to fetch the data if it's find either the name or the city as we have mentioned, then only it is going to fetch the data. So string, I will use the name, all right, and the string type I will use the city. All right, so this is the method you have to just you have to declare inside your repository. And this is the user defined method or a user custom finder, like the method. And this method we have executing according to the requirement, because we have the requirement either the name should match or the city name should match, then we will fetch the user information, right? So for this we don't need to write any query regarding that. We can just invoke this by using the JP repository, by just defining this method, and then we can use this method. So just go to the user service, and now let's me create one more method inside my service layer. All right, so copy and paste. Yeah, so this is my, so let's change this method name. uh, Get user by name or city. All right, so here we need to pass string name, and then also we need to pass string city. All right, and here user repository, so inside this if you'll see, I have already created that method, right? So let me call this method with the find. You can see that find by name or find by city is available inside my repository. All right, so this is taking the name and the city. All right, so this is my so this is my the service layer, and now I need to I don't know why it is showing, because I have already created. Okay, no problem. So let's go to the controller, and here now add one more endpoint. So let me copy this previous endpoint, and then I will edit according to the requirement, right? So first of all, I will add the request mapping. So get user by city or name. All right, so this is my URL, and here I will, first of all, I will pass the name, and then I will use again city. All right, so this information I have to pass inside my URL, the name and the city, and the name and the city will be taken by this path variable. So I need to add one more path variable, make this as a name, and this is the city. All right, so let me change the name city by the city or name. All right, and we have to change this also. So we have the method uh, get user by name or city name. All right, and here it is taking the name and the city, and then we are returning as a list. So yeah, so we have created our own like custom method find by name or city. All right, and then we have added this to a service class also, this method. All right, and this method is like already present. All right, so save this. Now let's go to our postman. So before that, all right, I'm going to take this URL. All right, and here I need to pass the name and the city. So let's go to the postman, and here let's change this. All right, so this is the get user by city or name, and here I need to pass the name of the user. So let's say that name of the user as like Ashish. All right, and here the city was like Ranchi, right? So Ranchi, right? And this is the get method. So let me hit a send button, and here you can see that I was able to fetch this data by the Ashish name and the Ranchi. And let me hit all right, so let me change the name of the. All right, so here I'm using the username as the Asis, but here the Ranchi name is different. All right, so but here like the one criteria is matching. Name is like there inside my database. So let's see that whether it is fetching or not. So yes, it is. All right, it is fetching because we are using the OR statement. Right, either the name should match or the Ranchi should match. Means the city should match. Now I change the name as a ASH, right? So here I'm passing the ASH and the city as a rain. So now neither the name nor the city is matching, so it should not give us a result. So let's hit the button. Yeah, so here you can see that we are getting an empty result. It means that there is no data present inside my database with the name ASH and with the city name as a rain, right? So in this way we can say that our the implementation is working fine, right? So in this way we can add n number of like method according to our requirement, and you can use this doc for doing any operations as is equals to, is between, less than, or like greater than. Only you have to use, sorry, where I missed that. Yeah, it is upside, I think. Yeah, so only you have to use this like the method name, and you can do, and you can fetch any data according to your requirement, right? So in this lecture, guys, we have learned, or we have like discussed how to write your own custom method to fetch any data from the database by using a JPA repository with a Spring Boot project, right? So thank you guys and have a nice day and see you in the next lecture.